Hey everyone, it's Bob Pulver. Welcome back to another episode of Elevate Your AIQ. Today I am joined by Mr. Brian Fletcher, co-founder of FM, a trailblazing consultancy helping companies unlock the full potential of AI, not someday in the future, but right now. The background leading high impact engineering and innovation teams at global consultancies, Brian is no stranger to scaling bold ideas into real world transformation. In our conversation, we go beyond the buzzwords. Brian shares how AI is reshaping the way we build, lead, and imagine what's next. If you're a leader trying to stay ahead of the curve, or just curious about how to actually do innovation at scale with AI, this one is for you. I think you really appreciate my conversation with Brian, so let's get into it. Thank you again for listening. Hey everyone, this is Bob Pulver. Welcome back to another episode of Elevate Your AIQ. Today, I have the pleasure of speaking with Mr. Brian Fletcher. How you doing this morning, Brian?
Good. How you doing, Bob?
I'm doing great. Thanks so much for joining me.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Just to kick things off, why don't we hear a little bit about your background? I know you've jumped to domains and spaces a bit over the course of your career, and then love to hear what prompted you to start your new adventure with FM.
Yeah. No, that's great, Bob. Yeah, so my background, oh Lord, going way back, back to school was I had a journalism degree, back in the day. And I think for me personally, I was, the time when I went to college, I didn't know what I wanted to do. And so I just picked something that vaguely interested me, and that was journalism at the time. So, but I secretly wanted to be a rock star. So I got my degree, and then, on graduation of college, just got in the back of a van and played drums for a band for a couple of years. So super fun, and you get these like nice unintended kind of educations on how to run a fledgling business and stuff like that. How do you take $20 from a gig and make the gas money to the next one? So it was fun.
Nice.
So that was a lot of fun. I still play music to this day, which is great. So music is a big love of mine. In fact, I had band practice last night, so it was great. But, that was kind of my interest and everything. And obviously it's hard to make a living there. And, I kind of took a circuitous route to software. I was always technically minded. When I was really young, I took my Atari 800 and coded using the basic programming language. And so I was always naturally interested in programming, but I didn't get a computer science degree, like I told you. So it was kind of a back door. A friend of mine, his wife was working at a .com startup. And she's like, I think you could do this. And I was like, oh, interesting. She kind of noticed that in me. So I lied my way into my first job. I was like, I can do development, and I couldn't, but I poured myself into it. And it was like that moment. It was a very much an aha moment for me. I was like, this is my calling, software. I just loved it instantly. And for me, it was like peeling back the onion of learning all the different domains of technology and software and delivery, and learning how to deliver as part of a team and all that stuff. So that was like my first kind of awakening into software and how much I loved it. And there are a lot of people that are musicians that are in the creative and software fields. There's something about my brain chemistry, I think, that also helped. And then, that was great. And, a number of years, honing my craft. And then I found my way to my first agency. So another friend of mine approached me and was like, we're doing some good things at this agency. I think you should come. And so I interviewed and got the job there. That company was called Razorfish. I think people might have heard of them, but that was my second aha moment. I was like, I love software. And then I was like, I love the pace of an agency. I'm learning new things. For me, it's always been about learning and building upon my learnings throughout my career. In fact, I get really uncomfortable if I'm not learning. If there's no one around me that I can learn from, it makes me uncomfortable. So that was my second aha moment that this is calibrated to me and the way I like to work. And so that was great. So that started my agency career. And I just kept doing that over and over again. I was at Razorfish. I was at Ogilvy and Mather with Ogilvy One. And then I spent, ultimately the last 10 years of my career was at a company called Huge. And I started as a tech director. And when I left, I was the global chief technology officer. So a great education, learned a ton at that job. But then last year it was time to move on from my last gig. And I was like, what do I want to do next? I really didn't want to repeat myself, and I wanted to build on my knowledge, and that's what became FM, which is my new software consulting company that I founded late last year in 2024. And yeah, so that's kind of my journey, my career, how we got to FM. That's
Yeah, no, it's I relate to definitely certain parts of that story. Certainly the nonlinear career
yeah,
path, which is becoming more of the norm. I think back when you and I were growing up, that was, I don't want to say it was frowned upon, but it was like, wait, what are you gonna do? And how'd you get from that to that? And
yeah,
are you just gonna take anybody's advice and go in that direction? But yeah, I mean, I didn't know what I wanted to do. I wound up at IBM after bar backing and valet parking and doing every hourly job around Atlanta, and then I was like, okay, this job's, maybe I should just try to get a daytime
yeah,
during
yeah,
the light daylight hours. Maybe I should try to get a
yeah.
job.
Get a real
Yeah,
job.
yeah. But even then, I mean, but for me, it was IBM, a huge company, and so there were always things that I could spot, and if they interested me enough, I would build relationships with people and sort of navigate, through that. And so, but yeah, there's certain inflection points where you're like, no, I'm going to go where I know I'm going to continue to learn and be engaged, right? There's things that interest me, and maybe it's not the most lucrative path, maybe it's not the shortest path, but I know that that's going to pay dividends at the end, or at least you have a hunch that could
Yeah,
pay dividends at the
yeah,
end.
absolutely. I went where my interest lied. I've always been guided by that, and as opposed to like just not getting a job for making money. And it goes back to like when I chose to go to college and didn't know what I wanted to do. I was just like, I'm going to go to college to learn how to learn. I don't, I wasn't those types of people that like went and got an MBA. And then, I had this plan that I was executing along the way.
Yeah,
John Lennon's like, life's what happens to you while you're making other plans or whatever. It's like I
right.
just, I did follow my interests, follow my passions, and I think it's worked out. It's been very lucky for me. I certainly am very feel very g- you know feel very lucky, and I know that doesn't always work out for the best in those kind of scenarios, but for me, it's been great. And I think too, when I decided to found FM, I was a little bit uncertain, and I've got a co-founder that's helping me with that. But ultimately, what made me decide to do my own thing was I was like, I'm going to work my ass off. I've always worked my ass off my entire career. It might as well be for myself, and I have control over my own destiny, which is great.
Yep.
It's a great feeling.
Yeah, I agree. So tell me about Pep. What are you guys working on, the platform? I remember when Tim Visconti connected us. I remember just being really intrigued with
Yeah,
what you were building, and sounded really intriguing, ambitious. But I was like, oh, I could definitely see myself bringing some ideas to you
yeah.
and the team. So
Yeah, I mentioned that, I didn't want to repeat myself, but I wanted to build on my skills. I'm not going to start over and, own a liquor store or whatever. I need to build on my skills. So, so effectively what FM is a software consultancy born in the age of AI. At this moment in time, I've seen this throughout my career, these very specific moments, whether that's the early internet and web technologies, or the rise of mobile, the rise of social, all of these moments that I've lived through and seen, I'm seeing with the world of AI, large language models, et cetera. It is revolutionizing effectively how business can be done. And, all aspects of society really are being, there's a revolution going on with regards to that. So when I was founding FM, I was very aware of that moment that we're in and how I can build on my strengths as, from my perspective, software is a very broad term, but to sharpen it a little bit for you and your listeners, my career has been about building usable digital experiences for people, like products, digital product development. So I have a very strong background in user experience, and I meld that with software understanding to build usable products. That's what I can do with software from my perspective. So, a software consultancy born in the age of AI, I look at it from two sides of a coin. So on one side, large language models and AI in general, more broadly speaking, are revolutionizing how software is developed. And I see it every day. I use it every day. And I'm seeing this revolution in how we build software. We are not handing off the job to an AI, but we are certainly leveraging what AI can help us with as a tool to deliver software. And what we believe at FM is that enables us to deploy software into situations we would not have done so in the past. I'm talking to clients every day where I'm like, 2 years ago, I wouldn't have recommended this. Now I'm recommending this. Because we believe that, your software should be as unique as your business is. And it's a little bit of an anti-platform move, to be honest. Like when we say like going against like these like big, monolith enterprise platforms, we think you're now able to deploy what we call custom software solutions to areas to really optimize for your business, not for anybody else's, but for your business. So anyway, so that's the one side of the coin is like software development is changing. We can deploy more software and we can, really, I think, solve new and novel challenges with software that we weren't doing in the past. The other side of the coin is we can do new things with software. Software can behave differently than it did in the past. And what I'm talking about is, if you want to call it agentic systems or whatever, software can make decisions on the fly. It's not that deterministic way of, if then and all these like very careful business rules. There's a lot more fuzziness in it, how it can behave. And that is, sometimes, terrifying, but also really offers new opportunities, for how we can revolutionize, different processes by building software that can make decisions in real time and can be that companion with a user. I'm always a big believer in humans in the loop. So we want to leverage AI to do things, not to automate things, not to replace people, but to make people's output the best it can be. That's the aspiration. I want you to be able to do this at a level you were not able to do. I'm not trying to remove you from the equation. I'm trying to augment your intelligence, right? It's not artificial, it's augmentation of intelligence. And so we think that those two sides of the coin or what really is that nexus where FM lives. And, so it's really exciting right now, and we're having some great conversations with our early clients. And it's been super fun. It's a chaotic time. The hype cycle is real, but it's been a lot of fun, and I'm really excited where things are headed.
So when you have some of those initial conversations, or you're talking to prospects and things like that, and you explain what you just explained to us, what's some of the like pushback that they get? Like, because I could see people arguing, well, when you say software can now do things that software couldn't do before, but you're also maintaining, humans in the loop and, some semblance of human centricity, just thinking back to your earlier days about user experience and things like that. Like how do you think about, squaring those two things? Or maybe it's just a matter of unpacking, like when you say software can now do more than it did before, where do you draw where's the new line to draw that says we're not going to do these things?
I think when I talk about AI to people, I always want to ask them a lot of questions about where they are with their understanding of AI. Because I think it's funny, I was telling my daughter about founding FM. She's like, why are you starting an AI company? Like she could not wrap her head around it. Like, what are you going to do with this? And I'm like, that was just an interesting response. She's 17 years old. So she's like, she's aware of this stuff. And I, I tried to explain to her, like, what's your understanding of it? Because she was just like, it's Chat GPT. I'm just talking to, like, that's her understanding of what AI can do. And I'm explaining to her, Chat GPT, Claude, or whatever, that is an application built around a large language model for a specific purpose. It's a chat application. That's just one way to deploy a large language model. I mean, it's a product. It's, ChatGPT is a product. It's not a technology. It's a product. And so it's like you can do other things with large language models that aren't that. And that's what we're doing. So we're not at FM, we're not building chatbots. Of course, we could build a chatbot, and that's sometimes if that's the business need or whatever, we could do it. But I'm more interested in these agentic systems that can.
I want to take a break real quick just to let you know about a new show we've just added to the network. Up Next at Work, hosted by Gene and Kata Keel of the Devon Group. Fantastic show. If you're looking for something that pushes the norm, pushes the boundaries, has some really spirited conversations, Google Up Next at Work, Gene and Kata Keel from the Devon Group.
Really change the way a process gets done. So let me make it real for you. So one exciting area that we're looking at with FM is around content supply chain optimization. So think about a marketing group within a larger organization. These teams are really inefficient a lot of times, and they're generating content for a variety of channels. They have a variety of tools that they're using. And I think they stand the most to gain from a large language model. What do large language models do? They generate content. They can generate content. And there are certainly some purpose-built tools that are doing just that, right? Things like Writer and Copy AI and other types products and applications that are being used that. But that's just one thing. There's a whole process that's involved with the ideation process, the research, all the way to the content generation, the content, like deploying it to channels, then measuring it. That's a whole like life cycle that I have. That's been my background for most of my career, is around content management systems and other ways to basically, wrestle content into systems and deploy them. So we're talking to companies about how we would revolutionize that process. And, and what I always say to people is like, when you apply AI to a process, it's not the old like digital transformation type world where we're just digitizing a process. In the world of large language models, when you take a process and apply AI to it, the entire process changes. Things that were 3 steps are now 1 or maybe even 0 steps for you. And so when that happens, you all of a sudden can do new things that you wouldn't be able to do before, and that's what's exciting to me is like, so we work with our clients to define a process that we can, knowing what we know about what large language models can do, about what they can fill in the gaps. And we basically work with them to reinvent a new process. And in the course of that, we're going to become way more efficient and optimized and all that stuff. And we're ultimately we'll want to do better work at the end of the day. So that makes it real, hopefully, that we're doing that in new ways. And that's been really, really, those conversations have been very interesting in the previous weeks and months.
Yeah, no doubt. So are these enterprise clients? Is it small, medium business?
Yeah,
I mean, what's
it's
your
like for this kind of a use case, it tends to be more of those enterprise level clients because it's usually you want team, we're talking about teams of 100 or whatever in the marketing organization. So that use case is really primarily aimed at that enterprise market. Now, FM also has other markets that we're talking to, and I would say they're much more the mid market, because going back to our premise that software is now more viable in ways that it wasn't before, we think mid market can really benefit from that.
Yeah, I feel like there's a lot of opportunity to, when you talk about sort of extending the concept of doing more with less into the AI realm. I mean, I think you're always, well, as you pointed out, let's talk about where your challenges are. Let's talk about where your bottlenecks are. I feel like we went through this. So a lot of companies that maybe didn't start to modernize, a decade or so ago with either advanced analytics or some form of automation. I mean, even intelligent automation beyond robotic process automation was available, 10 years ago, but not everyone made those investments, right? So I feel like now there's an opportunity for some of these companies to sort of, catch up or even leapfrog some of the competition if they make the right investments and they see, well, you guys are spending an inordinate amount of time going in and out of these different, CMSs, or I've got a, some form of like copy paste, into this. There's a lot of manual things. And so I think one of the things that people need to think about when they get nervous about, automation and AI, taking some of their work away, you've got to really think a little bit more deeply about the kinds of things that you want to do versus where you're actually spending your time, and how do you balance that in a in an efficient and effective way. So this isn't just about productivity, how much more quickly can we put this campaign out or whatever. It's about where am I most effective, where's my team most effective, and how do we complement that or augment that team efficiency and effectiveness with these new capabilities.
Yeah. Well, and where my mind goes in that train of thought too is, with any new technology like large language models or AI. Well, AI is not a new technology. It's been around for 50 plus years, right? So, but large language models are relatively new, like 2017 and up. But you know, what we're talking to clients about is trying to recalibrate them to some process. I mean, we've always been, in the agencies I've worked at, very much, agile processes and iterative development design, a lot of testing being baked into that, and trying to move very quickly and shorten those loops. That's been just a long-term trend, but I'm even trying to push that even further, meaning, how do you test these things very, very quickly? I don't want to go through the standard consulting playbook of we're going to spend 6 to 8 months planning, and then we're going to execute this, and we're going to do this massive build. It is moving very, very quickly. And, we at FM, we call it build as strategy, meaning that we're trying to build as quickly as possible because we want to get the insights and we want to be able to pivot and learn from our insights as quickly as possible. We're going to start small. We're not going to try to boil the ocean. We're going to pick a highly valuable use case to apply this to, and we're going to build it and test it very, very, very quickly, right? In 6 weeks or whatever that is, right? We have a project we just kicked off. This is much more, not enterprise, more mid-market, smaller, but we are standing up environments in a day, and then the next day we are building out this. I mean, like we're literally building this platform for this client, and the speed is dizzying how fast we're moving. And because there's just, and a lot of that's not even AI. It's just like, we've made some choices in the software and how we're going to approach this that allows us to move so quickly. And we're trying to recalibrate our clients to that, which is like, no. Like, we're going to get in with a very senior lean team, no overhead. We're not like, it's a principal-led engagement. I'm leading this engagement as a principal on this account. I'm a subject matter expert in a domain, and FM has access to a lot of these people, and we're able to deploy a very lean, efficient team. But our goal is not to, our goal is to move as quickly as we possibly can, and get the learnings along the way. And that seems to be resonating. We'll see how it goes, but that seems to be resonating.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. So one of the things that I've been talking to folks about recently is around AI augmenting some of the things that you were doing anyway as you went through, either product development or, solution design. I was thinking about, I had this thought about like a design thinking workshop where, some form of, agent is playing the role of, maybe somebody who's not in the room or on the Zoom or whatever, as you go through that, to offer, maybe fill in the blanks in terms of like the cognitive diversity, if you will, of the group in the room, right? Because you want to get those different perspectives, make sure there's not something that you're overlooking, or maybe there's a persona that people hadn't thought about, because you've got to start to think about, well, this is how we're designing it and who we're designing it for, but you've also got to think about how it could be misinterpreted, misused, or whatever. I mean, I feel like that's part of having the human in the loop. So do you go through those kinds of exercises, or how have you sort of used AI in your own in the process of developing these solutions for your clients, I guess how has AI sort of modernized the concept of product development in software, even from 6-7 years ago?
So it's funny you mentioned human in the loop, but I'm going to go in the opposite direction. So another venture that I'm involved with is called Logic, and it is a startup that is in a very high level way to describe it. It is about synthetic personas that represent populations that share similar attributes. So what Logic is doing is that we are effectively building a multi-agent cognitive model that's meant to mimic the behaviors of real people at the end of the day. And what we believe at Logic is that we're able to deploy these synthetic personas to do a component of user testing around product development. Not replacing, actual getting the product in front of users. That is always going to be needed. But we feel that if you deploy these synthetic personas to a variety of use cases, some of it's products, some of it's marketing and and messaging and those types of things, you're able to test at scale a lot more ideas. Going back to what I said earlier about like you can do new things with software and the process itself changes. What we're doing with Logic is a prime example of this. Because you think about like the way you used to do like focus group testing or whatever, you have to go recruit all these people. It's basically who can show up at 2 p.m. on a Thursday afternoon.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
So the need to find your actual ideal customer goes out the window because it's who's going to show up that day. But imagine if you can very finely tune, no, this is my target customer. I know that because of all my research. Let me create these synthetic personas that's going to behave like my target customer. And now I've got that kind of solved. And that's what Logic is doing, is solving that. And then now I can throw 100 ideas at those and then find what resonates with them. And, we're not trying to find the things that we know are to be true. We're trying to find the outliers and the surprising things that we would not have thought of. And so we think that's really powerful at Logic and would allow you to really test more ideas and just revolutionizing the product development flow in general. And so we've got some, we're kind of pre-beta. We've got some early customers that we're working with this on, and this like light bulb goes off when they start to see the product. I hope that, I'm not sure if that answers your question, but that's one way I see product development changing is those kinds of approaches.
Yeah, no, I think that's fascinating. I hadn't thought about using synthetic, I'll just use a broader category of synthetic data. I hadn't thought about using it in that way, but it makes total sense because, a decade ago or more, I was doing like a lot of social analytics work, social media analytics work at IBM, and had these, I learned about these concepts of like not just segmentation, but micro segmentation, like looking at these different attributes of different personas and how they mix together. And some really creative, software companies had grown out of that to say, oh, I can tell you, what percent, forget about like zip codes and, things like that. I can tell you that, these people who are, Democrats who live in this, neighborhood also are more likely to buy, Cool Ranch Doritos, and like just all these random like associations. And so if you think about that in a much more of a constructive context, where you're not trying to, sell people more processed foods in this case, like you could really get down to some of these, like you're saying, like it's almost like having an automated way to do like anomaly detection in a way, and what are these outliers, like you said. So it's really fascinating, and I could see how that would accelerate. I mean, forget about the the basic sort of workflow and process itself. To your point, I mean, I remember being in market intelligence at IBM, having to sit through and watch through one way mirror, watch these focus groups, and I remember the planning for that. And now you got me thinking about like survey design and all these things. Now I'm going to send out a survey and only get maybe I didn't get enough respondents. Maybe it's not a representative sample, back and forth. And, maybe we should have asked these questions, in a different way. I mean, it's extremely, time consuming because some of your team, they're literally just waiting and planning to hopefully get the data that they need to, make better decisions. And so you've sort of hyper accelerated that.
Well, yeah, and what I described, which is around a very marketing focused activity or even product development, that's just one application of this. We've talked about it's more logic around HR and corporate communications. How could you could actually like model your team that reports to you and understand how their messaging would go down for those team and those attributes, right? I'm over an engineering team, but someone over a sales team has a different kind of, just employee base that they're talking to. And, so there's corporate communications. There's even things around like sales and training. You think about sales, how do you train a sales team, right? You throw them on calls and just throw them in the deep end, right? And they have a script and they follow the script. But imagine if you could practice at scale and monitor that practice, but have those personas react like real people and be trained to put up, very specific types of, friction to the sales process and how do you overcome that. So from a training aspect, that's really exciting too. So there's so many directions this could go. And I think it's really interesting. Yeah.
I guess I think about some of these topics in the context of responsible AI and human-centric AI, which is, as I think you and I have talked about before, I think about, like you mentioned, we talked about before about human in the loop. And, but there's an argument that says that phrase in itself implies that we've left all this stuff to AI and we're just in this sort of supervisory kind of role, please don't screw up, like, somebody overseeing, the factory floor with a bunch of robots. And that can be, disconcerting to some people because it's really, humans should be in charge, and then maybe it's AI that should be, sort of in the loop, right? Like we should still be in control. And so, some of that gets into sort of a philosophical debate a little bit, but the point is, we've got to make sure, especially when it comes to decision-making processes, that humans actually understand what we're giving to AI and understanding how its logic and its reasoning, works, so that we know we're confident and we can trust the output of the system, just like you would trust a subject matter expert.
Yeah, I mean, it's a really interesting topic of discussion, and there's so many ways I could take that topic. I first of all, I would say in the world of like responsible AI and thinking about that, I feel the hype cycle is dying down a little bit, which I'm really excited about because in the early days, it's over exuberant and it also gets it wrong a lot of times, right? So like they think that it can do all this stuff. Now we're coming to reality. And that's exciting to me because people are like, okay, cool, the hype is off, but what can I really do with that? And so those of us who have been actually like, who understand what it can do and are so excited about what it can do are happy to see the hype cycle calm down. So that's just one component because I think that it says, okay, now cool, let's roll our sleeves up and get to work on where it can help and forget about all the stuff where people are trying to apply it to things that it's not good at. Because what is it good at? I mean, a large language model, from my perspective, is a linguistic probability machine. It's got it, if you take the long view, you can think of the last 30 years or so in the rise of the internet. It was the digitization of all of our knowledge. We've translated all of these books and thoughts and everything into digital form on websites, on Wikipedia, on e-commerce platforms. There's just so much online. There's conversations happening online, all that stuff. So like the last 30 or so years was basically collecting all this data. And now with large language models, we found that we can find a way to make sense of all that data in a really interesting way. So all of the training of these large language models have effectively summarized all this knowledge in a way that we can do some really cool things with it. But what we're doing with it is it's literally, predicting the next word, and that's what it's really doing under the hood. It's just saying, well, what is, probabilistically speaking and semantically speaking, what is the best thing we can do, or what's the best next word to generate in this sentence or generate in this, image or video, etc. It's summarizing all that, and it's really good at doing some things that we wouldn't have been able to do before, where you can do things like take this marketing message and rewrite it in for this audience, or this, computer generated voice can all of a sudden speak in more corporate language, speak more casually, speak in a different language. Those are things that are really exciting that we really couldn't do at the scale we could do now. So like I go back to that way of thinking. So anyway, so I think that the hype cycle is dying down. We're being more realistic with what it can do and what it can't do. That will naturally remove a lot of the, frankly, bullshit from it, I think, which is great. And then, I do believe that the danger, and I'll give you an example closer to my world, which is like software development, right? So I've been leveraging large language models to help build that startup I mentioned, Logic, in the production of code. And that has been revolutionizing how we deliver software. But even within that world, it's just a tool like anything else. We're learning what it's really good at and what it's not good at. If you just say, build me a blah, blah, blah app, it'll just quickly get off the rails. But if you actually leverage a large language model to write a product spec first, and then take it to another large language model to say, take that product spec and create the prompts that you would need to do to actually generate that product spec, and then hand those prompts to another large language model and say, make a step-by-step process flow. Like if you do it that way, it's really effective. And that's a way where, like, if you put too much trust in the AI, you're going to get bad results. So we're going to learn how to use it well, and we're also going to learn what doesn't work. So that's going to help us with that governance and the way we're going to like oversee it. But if you expect the large language model to do all the work, you're going to get really poor results.
Yeah, I think so. Key is, you still need to go through an iterative, process, right? Just like if you were, well, I don't like to anthropomorphize AI any more than it's already getting done, but you do need to talk to it like someone on your team and say, go through these steps. If you just dump it, I mean, the same way people probably, just getting into the conversational AI, tools now are realizing that, well, I need to have a better structure to my prompting, and I can't just
prompt
dump it all in
engineering,
at
all that
once.
stuff,
This isn't just copy and paste and magic happens just naturally. But Brian, I wanted to go back to something you mentioned earlier around understanding where your clients are on the journey and their sort of literacy or readiness. And I guess just get your general thoughts about that within the current workforce, and then my daughter's about your daughter's age, and just thinking about the needed sort of education even for the future workforce. So how do you approach it? We'll start with the current workforce with your clients. Like how do you assess that? How do you approach it?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's no easy like shortcut here. I mean, that goes more into the, just for lack of a better word, garden variety consulting with our clients, asking the right questions to really assess them. We have some ways that we can structure those conversations to get what we need, just to understand where you are in your maturity model, your adoption curve. I will say that I am, just because I live in this world, I'm constantly amazed by how far behind a lot of people I'm talking to are. And that is sometimes just like, whoa, wait, they're not where I thought they were. They're not even close, right? And so I've got to calibrate myself more often than, than my client, because I'm 2 steps ahead and I got to back up a little bit. I gave a talk a couple weeks ago to a room about just general purpose AI in business. And I very quickly, within 10 minutes, realized, oh, wait, they're they're not even quite there yet. They're just kind of wrapping their head around the fact that there's different models. So I do find myself having to recalibrate, but the intake questionnaires and the way that we assess our clients there's nothing magical about that. We don't have a special process to help us. It's just general kind of asking questions and really navigating that way. So I don't really have a lot of insight to offer you on that area, but it's a very important step. And if we skip that, we get into trouble very quickly. So you calibrate that. I will say too, and this is definitely true. You probably see headlines about this, about how hard it is to bring these solutions to production. POCs are easy. I could build you something in 15 minutes. It's pretty amazing right now. Taking that to a production environment is a way different story. And so, we have some people within our network that can help us with those conversations and helping companies figure out how to bring these things to production. But that is still a very heavy lift right now, I would say.
When you say that, you're referring more to adoption and transformation rather than just a technical implementation. Is that fair?
Well, I think it's both, actually. I think that the actual production workloads. I mean, because just think about a production, like moving something to production that, like I was saying earlier, has a certain level of quote unquote decision making in it.
Hey, I'm Katie Van Horn.
And I'm Jackie Clayton.
We're your hosts of the Inclusive AF podcast, where we take on DEI, leadership, and HR without all the corporate fluff.
That's right. We've got decades of experience, a lot of opinions, and zero tolerance for performative anything.
Every week, we dig into what it really takes to build inclusive workplaces with honesty, strategy, and a few side eyes.
We'll talk about the tough stuff, power dynamics, privilege, what's broken in the system, and how we can all do better.
And don't worry, it's not all heavy. We bring receipts, laughs, and real talk from people actually doing the work.
Think of it as your weekly dose of truth, tips, and a little tea to help you lead with intention and show up for your people.
So if you're ready to push past the buzzwords and get into the actual work of inclusion,
you're in the right place. So subscribe to the Inclusive AF podcast.
New episodes drop every week.
Catch us on Spotify, Apple, or wherever you get your podcasts.
We'll be here breaking it down one inclusive convo at a time.
In a deterministic software development way, you have unit tests and ways to verify that that's still working how you want it to work as you launch new features. So you don't want to unintentionally break some software. And there's a lot of ways that you can infuse observability and other types of logging systems to make sure that that's true, and unit tests and integration tests and all that stuff. That's the old world. In a new world where you have a large language model in the mix, what do you do when they launch and update that large language model that may break some assumptions that you've got in your code base about how it's going to react differently all of a sudden? So all of a sudden, you've got to lock it to a version of a large language model, a specific version of that. And then when you want to upgrade it, it's a lot more difficult to assess it. So there's things like drift and those types of things where things are, it's going to behave differently. So you have, and in a lot of ways, it's similar to how you would test it before, but you've got to do that. And it's not as straightforward how you would upgrade a large language model in production, And so that's a technical challenge that people are wrestling with right now. And then also, but then the adoption as well, getting things into production, or getting, I think of adoption from an employer-centric view or employee-centric view. But, if you're so a lot of the stuff that we're doing, the audience is an internal team, not your customers. So we're building products for internal teams to use, right? So, and that helps a lot because you can put some constraints for them that you wouldn't be able to put out in the public. So anyway, so that's where my head goes. Like production workflows are just really, really complicated and should not be underestimated.
Oh, for sure. And I also think, you mentioned digital transformation before. I mean, this is not the same thing. And by the way, you don't have a good track record of transformation in general in the past. So if
Yeah,
this
why
is,
would it be any different now?
yeah, well, if anything, this is more complicated and more widespread. So, what are you going to do differently? You got to sort of reorient yourself for, this, massive change in how work is getting designed or redesigned. On the sort of education front, thinking about our kids, the future workforce, it's concerning to me. It's been concerning to me for a while. I forget when we spoke last, Brian, if I mentioned that I had some proposals to put something together around education, not to go necessarily go and try to sell something to the schools themselves, but to sort of augment the formal education there with some of the basics, right? Like I'm not expecting everyone to do what you did and start tinkering with their Ataris or NESs or PlayStation 5s or whatever
Oh,
we're
I
up to now.
dated the hell out of myself by
Yeah.
mentioning.
Well, I'm
Yeah.
with you, right? So yeah, not everyone's going to have that kind of curiosity and fascination and be a tinkerer, but in the same way, like you still want to know in general sort of how it works and why these things behave, differently and the different options that you have. And I think even just teaching, this isn't just about hands to keyboard. Can I teach my daughter to prompt, Claude better? This is about when to use it, when not to use it. If you're going to build something, these are the things that you should think about from an ethics and a fairness, kind of standpoint. If you were going to create an app that's going to wind up in the app store and it's going to have a whole bunch of users. And so I guess I just wonder like how you think about our kids' respective sort of preparedness for higher education and work, because the jobs that they may be even thinking about, assuming that they know more than you and I did in high school about what they want to do. Like how do you even think about that? Because in 2030, when my daughter's out of college, I mean, there's going to be a whole bunch of jobs that may not exist even today in 2025.
Yeah, I mean, in that area, I go in a very historical context. I go back to the world, the idea that when something disruptive happens, human beings are incapable of imagining something that doesn't exist yet. Like all we naturally go back to, it's going to eliminate all these jobs. That's all we can imagine in our brains. Like we don't know what, I mean, and so you default to that, right? So I catch myself going that way and going in that direction in my brain because it's just part of our humanness that we think that way. So I have a kind of a remarkably laissez-faire attitude. I'm like, it's going to figure itself out. Don't want to overly like wring my hands around that fact, right? I think that yes, the world will change. The world's been changing forever. It's always going to change. It's rapidly changing. That's what's terrifying to us. I do think it's a weird way to reverse it, but like when you look at something that's as disruptive as AI and how it can be seemingly disruptive, I say too, like if you think of it like an anthropomorphized thing, like AI is a thing. I say it has no choice but to calibrate to humans and our needs. Like we can't evolve ourselves, and so it's got to meet us where we are, I think. And that's kind of a way to reverse my thinking of like, oh, it's going to quickly eclipse us. No, we have to, or we have to make it calibrate to us. Might be a better way to put it. So it feels, well, it is very disruptive, and we don't know what's going to happen next. But I think it's going to calibrate a lot more to our speed and what we can adjust to, I would say. I think education is changing the rapidly. And what is knowledge? What is, I was listening to another podcast a couple months ago, and it was talking about teachers, professors at MIT, and the trend at MIT is that they are doing in-person tests because that's the only way they can guarantee that you're not using AI in your test. So so it's really, that is more important to get you in a room, but also at the same time, these professors are encouraging the use of AI. And what they're making a distinction on is, I'm testing your knowledge versus I'm testing what you can produce. When I'm testing your knowledge, I want you in the room so I can see what you know. But when I want to test what you're able to produce, yes, use AI. In fact, you need to use AI to do that. I think I like that distinction, which is, yeah, this thing can augment you and you can do amazing things. And if you couple that with a solid understanding of the material and what it is, then you can do amazing things. Now, doesn't work for all domains. Like if you're studying to be a doctor, you have to know the basics, right? And that's that. I can't have a doctor who doesn't understand, how cellular things happen in the body, right? It's like they have to understand that and internalize it. So that's the challenge, I think, is students who are shortcutting that through the use of large language models. And so, anyway, those are some random thoughts, but those are where my mind goes.
Yeah, no, I think about those things too. And what are we actually testing you on? Using AI shows, gets you into the habit of, augmenting your own thinking and then producing an output using, you've been resourceful, you were, creative, and you were curious yourself, and you were applying your critical thinking and all these things, and then you just sort of used AI, I think, to your point, just to create, just augment that with. So it's about the way you sort of absorb information and then make an informed decision as a result of that. And if AI can help you do that, that's great. But I think part of some of that just general testing ties into what I've seen in the talent acquisition space around assessments, right? Like I want to know how I know you're going to use AI when you get to the job, but guess what? You don't have the job yet. Let's see how your human brain, thinks, and go from there, because same thing, you don't know, people are trying to basically, it's a competitive market and people are trying to make sure they give the best possible answer. And so they're not even trusting themselves and their own brain to do so. So it gets a little scary, but ultimately I think, some of the education pieces are around just thinking ahead of what skills do I actually need to focus on, and what skills can I or will I be able to rely on technology in a support capacity or co-pilot kind of capacity can I do, and making sure that I don't outsource my critical thinking. It's one thing to, we've got calculators, so you don't have to do, long division and, advanced math in your head, or, with a pencil and paper, but we've still got to understand that we're not creating this dystopian future, a Wall-E kind of future where everyone's just, sitting on the couch eating those Cool Ranch Doritos and outsourcing everything else.
Yeah, I have the vision of Idiocracy in my head of people, they have no critical thought left in their body, and that's the dystopian future,
Exactly.
And you bring up the same thing. It's like spreadsheets didn't kill the accounting profession, right? So and once again, I'm sure when spreadsheets and calculators came out, these conversations were happening, right? Which is you don't need math. That's like, no, my kid brings the calculator to their math assessment. They're assessing different things, right? Which is the critical thinking and the logic and all the various aspects of how you assess someone who can think in mathematical terms and understand those concepts.
Yeah. Well, Brian, I want to be respectful of your time. This has been an awesome conversation. We probably could have talked for another hour.
Yeah, we should do it. We should do a part two.
Yeah.
This was great. I love the way your brain works too. It's nice. Yeah, it's been great talking with you today. I really appreciate it.
Likewise. All right. Well, thanks again for joining me. Thanks everyone for listening, and we'll see you next time.